think the United States is lying about this?
Amongst other reasons, the American president wants to show that he's a big boy, that he has powers, and that he is the world's leader. So he has to pick on a small country. He will never pick on China. China has violated more international laws than Iraq. China has weapons of mass destruction for political reasons of diversion of public opinion, possibly. And invariably, the U.S. needs a small power to pick on, creating tension, creating a fear, so that America would stay there forever and ever, for the oil, of course. Thank you. We can call the White House directly and tell the president that we disagree with his policy in trying to threaten and kill 10, 20,000 people in Iraq. We can tell him. But if my voice and your voice go there, these are two voices. But if we can get 20,000 such phone calls, it will have an impact on the policymakers. Now, how to activate our people? That is very difficult because our people don't know that they have such rights and that this is an important part of their duty as Muslims.
And he was a tower of strength in a very difficult time through the hostage crisis. In Lebanon, with the persecution of Palestinians everywhere, he was always in the forefront. When the horrors of Sovereign Shatila became known, his voice was clear and forceful for justice and peace.
شكرا سعداء جدا أن نكون في لبنان وفي بيروت عاصمة عربية ومعقل الحريات في العالم العربي. نحن سعداء جدا أن نكون هنا. شكرا. شكرا جدا.
In Damascus, 2 Americans are proposing a plan to free captured Navy pilot Robert Goodman. Correspondent Rick Davis has more.
These 2 men are advocates and optimists. Dr. Mohammed Mehdi was born in Iraq. He was educated and lives in the United States and has long been a controversial advocate of Arab causes. They are optimists because they came with a plan for the release of Lieutenant Robert Goodman and for the withdrawal of American, Israeli, and Syrian troops from Lebanon. They brought that plan to the Syrian Foreign Ministry this morning. After a half-hour meeting with the foreign minister, they said arrangements are being made for them and possibly the news media to meet with Lieutenant Goodman.
Before Christmas or on Christmas Eve.
Maybe they ought to be under a military occupation if that's the sort of people they are.
Now you are suggesting what the United States should do.
I'm asking you what you think as an American citizen they should do.
To examine the cause of the issue. And this is the whole problem.
But
why
look,
we have had...
We have a foreign
anytime anybody
policy.
goes around with a bomb and blows people up, that we should examine the cause of the issue?
We have a foreign policy, Dr. Mehdi. It's not dictated by people who put bombs in embassies. How do we deal with them while we maintain our foreign policy? How do we deal with the people that put the bomb in there as an American?
If you are trying to deal with any one little issue by itself, you cannot. I am suggesting that there should be an overall examination. And the examination should be as to the cause of these activities rather than the symptoms of it.
Terrorism is a war. It's not only a war against Israel. As a matter of fact, Israel is completely incidental in all this. It's an international war that is a war against the West, against the democracies. And unless it is treated like a war, it is not going to end. The trouble is that the West of the world has not realized that situation yet. And that is why terrorism is still continuing.
The Zionists, before occupying Palestine, they had occupied the minds of the West. That is, they convinced the West that here is a land called Palestine without people, and here we are, the Jews, a people without the land. What a beautiful marriage, simple, humanitarian. But the truth of the matter is that the Zionists had hidden and lied about the fact that Palestine was already inhabited by Palestinians.
I think Dr. Mehdi very rightly pointed to the injustice of that situation, to a sort of a favoritism on the part of a lot of American policy, really favoring the Jewish state more than the rights and the aspirations of the Palestinian people. So I think he was calling America's bluff on that one.
And it was a pleasure to work with him in tandem, hand in hand, in trying to counter the falsehood of Zionist propaganda and the terrible repercussions of their policy of suppression and persecution of the innocent Palestinian people. They worked in tandem because he championed justice and truth, and I reiterated the Jewish attitude, which clearly depicts Zionism as atheism and heresy. So together we were very effective, and we had a very powerful impact whenever we appeared on the radio or on television.
Well, are we concerned with the Jewish human beings or the state per se? You know, the Jews existed long before the state did. And the state has existed, and with it has existed permanent war. Now, if our concern is with peace and the actual good of the individual human Jew, how about it? All the Jews to be there. I will recognize the right of all the Jews to go there. And that will bring peace, recognizing at the same time the right of the Palestinians to be the whole place for all of these people, all the Jews and all the Palestinians, ruled by majority.
Dr. Mehdi, let us stop this nonsense. You may go over well with a Hadassah group, but not with me. The fact of the matter is that we created in Israel to be for a Jewish state because we don't trust you. Now, I don't know how more blunt I can possibly be. We don't trust you, who killed Jews in Morocco and killed Jews in Yemen and killed Jews in Iraq, and you are from Iraq. And we, of course, we know about the Rashid Ali massacres of hundreds of Jews in 1941, not in 1850, not in the year 1200, in 1941, when a pro-Nazi government arose in Iraq, your former country. So spare me Rashid Ali's, and spare me Christians and Muslims. I want a Jewish state, and there's going to be a Jewish state, and for the next 50 years, you'll be on TV programs with your plan.
Rabbi Kahana, Assalamu alaikum. Shalom alaikum. You are a Zionist, an authentic Zionist. Yet the majority of the American Zionist Jews disagree with you and even despise you. You think that they are wrong, they think you are wrong, and the fact is that Zionism is wrong, being an aggressive, racist, reactionary movement. Now why? We heard the rabbi a few minutes ago says that he believes that God gave him this land. Now, if anybody in the 20th century has this belief, and the rabbi does genuinely believe in this, anybody believing in this, he must be a bit Michigano. He must be a bit crazy.
Muhammad Mehdi and Meir Kahane both agreed that the state of Israel was not and could not be both a Jewish exclusivist state and a democratic state.
Do you recognize that Israel has that land today and their right to that land, their right to live there in peace?
That they exist, that Israel exists, yes. Is it legitimate? No.
Doctor, there's a lot of things. Doctor, what accommodation are you willing to make?
We start from the assumption that the Jews have no right to Palestine, period. On the assumption of 3,000 years ago and the rest of the Michigan. What they do have is a human need for Palestine. A legitimate human need for Palestine, for an Israel, we recognize it. But at the same time, of course, we recognize the human right of the Palestinians to their land. So, the Zionists are really not that strong. I have explained it in this term. There is a football match. Goes to the field a team of 3 individuals. and the full team of the football is 11 persons, as you know. And so this team of 3 persons really cannot win a goal. But something very strange happens. This incomplete team of 3 persons scores the first goal, the second goal, the third goal, the 10th goal. And you ask, what happened? How come this incomplete team was able to score those goals? The answer, very simple. The other team doesn't exist. So this team of 3 persons appears to be the occupying of the whole field. What we need is to bring a team of 4 persons, 5 persons, then, and that is my function during these last 40 years.
He was an optimist. We call it, from our view, we call it revolutionary optimism. That is that the people are fundamentally the makers of history. They have to make history. It's not going to happen automatically.
Every American politician is supporting Israel. Is it because they love the Jews? No. Is it because they hate the Arabs and the Muslims? No. But the politician loves himself, wants to get elected. To get elected, he needs 51% of the votes. If 51% of the votes tell him, support Israel, he says, yes, sir.
Yesterday, the United States won but a single engagement in a long battle against terrorism. We will not end that struggle until the free and decent people of this planet unite to eradicate the scourge of terror from the modern world.
Those the measured words of President Reagan in the wake of the biggest U.S. airstrike since the war in Vietnam. 18 F-111 bombers based in Britain and 15 attack planes from aircraft carriers of the 6th Fleet carried out the attacks last night on the capital city of Tripoli and the port city of Benghazi, the site of a Soviet-built anti-aircraft missile base. Military bases were the main targets, but also hit was the residence of strongman Muammar Gaddafi. Among the 4 people killed in the bombardments, his 15-month-old adopted daughter, Hannah, and among the more than 100 hurt, 2 of Gaddafi's sons, ages 3 and 4.5.
President, most nations around the world are condemning his action.
It was in the emergency session of the United Nations Security Council where the Libyan ambassador condemned America's bombing raid as barbaric and savage.
Reaction to the raid was almost overwhelmingly against the American attack. Among the few supporters, British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, who allowed American warplanes to take off from Britain.
The United States has hundreds of thousands of forces in Europe to defend the liberty of Europe. In that capacity...
Do you think this settles the score with Libya, sir? To what extent do you think this settles the score with Libya?
It's not a question of settling scores. It's a question of acting against terrorism, of saying to terrorists that the acts they perpetrate will cost them.
Well, I think Mr. Gaddafi is certain to try to respond with new terrorist acts, but we've put him on notice. For any acts he takes against this country, he's going to get hit, and he's going to get hit hard. I strongly disagree with the notion that we had any obligations to Mr. Gaddafi or the PLO or any other terrorist organizations to talk to them, to give them notice, to deal with them. These people are not rational, they cannot be dealt with, and they are getting, in my judgment, exactly what they deserve.
Congressman, have you tried to meet with them to see them not rational? You are really stating something which is really unbecoming and insulting.
Sir, this nation has no obligation to deal with or talk to people who put bombs on airplanes, blow up discos where soldiers are entertaining themselves. These people are murderers. And in our country and in the civilized world, you give no consideration to people who engage in wholesale murder, and we have no obligation to do so internationally.
What the U.S. did tonight, wholesale murder.
This is an act of complete self-defense that any civilized people are entitled to take. I am proud of my country that among all the nations in the civilized world, we had the courage to act to defend our people.
A civilized behavior wouldn't have dictated upon President Reagan to go to the International Court of Justice. Wouldn't it have dictated upon him to go to the Security Council of the United Nations, where the U.S. has a veto power? Is this wholesale killing of people an act of terrorism? I call it even worse than an individual act of terrorism.
This is not the wholesale killing of anyone. This is a surgical, precise strike against those who would engage in murder. A simple police action done by the one country that had the courage to do it, and I'm proud of it.
They are the victims of American attack on Libya, on Tripoli, on Benghazi. And to them, America has not lived up to the rules of war.
Wait a minute, that attack on Tripoli, that came after attacks on our Marines orchestrated by Libya, that came after airport bombings in Italy. Libya has been the perpetrator of the terrorism, not the United States.
These are claims by the American press that Libya was responsible. As a matter of fact, President Reagan did not present one piece of evidence to link Gaddafi to the bombing in the disco in West Berlin.
All right, wait a minute. Do you know Gaddafi?
I personally have met with him.
Yeah, is he a nice guy? Is he a nice guy?
He's as nice of a guy as you are. There is a general feeling in America that we are correct, we are good, they are evil. Whatever the U.S. does is fair, is reasonable, is just, and whatever the others do is wrong.
We consider these murders, hijackings, and abductions an attack on all Western civilization by uncivilized barbarians. We will continue to act with appropriate restraint, but let no one doubt our resolve.
Welcome back to Crossfire. Our guest in New York is Mohammed Mehdi, president of the American-Arab Relations Committee. Do you think that the Arab people will be willing to accept a two-state solution that Arafat offers, which is a Palestinian state side by side with an Israeli state, a Jewish state, just as was originally, I guess, ordained in the 1947 UN resolution?
What that means is this, that the Palestinians should recognize the right of the European, American, and other Zionists to occupy Palestine. And instead of calling upon the Europeans and American occupiers to recognize the right of the Palestinians, they are calling upon the victims to recognize the right of the aggressor.
Mr. Mehdi, let me ask you this.
When you go back and look at history, when you go back and look at the beginnings, for example, of the PLO, it is where you see and originally saw the beginnings of terrorism.
As a matter of fact, the beginning of terrorism in the Middle East started with the creation of Israel. The whole establishment of Israel is an act of terrorism against the Palestinian people whose land has been taken over. They have been denied the normal human right to their land. And Palestinian hijacking takes place because, in the first place, the whole country of Palestine has been hijacked by the Zionist Jews with the support of the West.
I thought to myself at the time, why doesn't he go to Lebanon, where hundreds of thousands of Christians and Muslims have been slaughtered in a religious civil war? Instead, he chose to speak out only against the state of Israel and Jews.
He had a certain way of operation. He was very outgoing. Sometimes that antagonized people, but that attracted a good many people. And he was so successful at that whenever there would be a major happening in the Middle East, especially in regard to Arab-Israeli affairs, Mohammed Mehdi was always one of the first people sought by the media.
The Arabic voice, which was muted throughout the years, really found in him a person who is responsive, who's on the ball, who knows the American Constitution, who knows American history, who speaks to the American media in language which they understand.
Possibly I understand the psychology of these people more than anyone else in this country. They want to have their humanity be recognized, that they are doing these things because they have been hurt, that their parents have been destroyed, killed, their families wiped out by American bombs, by Israeli bombs, and to recognize that these guys are not doing this out of joy, but out of pain. And
do you or do you not endorse the actions of these hostage takers who you're on this show tonight representing?
Are you justifying these terrorist acts?
Are you saying that the Palestinians must throw the Israelis into the sea?
Freedom of the press is available for those who own the press. They can say whatever they want to, and they want to say whatever the government pleases the government. But those of us who are opposed to the policies of the government, we have to have our own news media. Hello, I am Mohammed Mehdi, and this is AP2AP TV. Our guest today is the most distinguished Palestinian diplomat and intellectual, Mr. Zuhdi Tarazi, permanent observer of the PLO to the United Nations. Our very special guest, Kwame Ture, otherwise known Stokely Carmichael. Kwame, welcome to these shores.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mehdi. It's certainly a pleasure and an honor to be with you. And always it's a great pleasure to be in the company of a fighter and certainly a long struggler.
And our guest was brilliantly beautiful. He was and is Rabbi Balfour Brickner. I called him, I said, you are my rabbi, and he was good enough to say that everyone needs a rabbi, and I agree. Especially me. But I go further. I think everybody needs a rabbi, needs a minister, needs an imam.
Dr. Mehdi was a young man who believed in the open society of America and wanted to make that open society more open.
You know, while Dr. Mehdi was not merely an American, but a great American, he came from a people who suffered great repression here and continue to suffer great repression here. Arab peoples, Muslim peoples, fully American and major contributors to the quality of life and goodness of our society.
Dr. Mehdi, I would say, was a very staunch anti-imperialist and supporter, as the statement says, of the struggle of oppressed people everywhere, including in this country. I think he admired, I know he admired Mao Zedong in the Chinese Revolution, but he was, of course, not a Maoist, like, you know, he wasn't a Marxist-Leninist Maoist like the Revolutionary Communist Party and myself.
People who are courageous and who stand up and say things that can be interpreted as unpopular by large groups of people, and particularly people in power, are always criticized. And the great thing about Dr. Mehdi, and the spiritual thing about Dr. Mehdi, was that he never allowed that to slow him down. He was always courageous.
بس أتذكر مدرسنا الأول في المكتبة هذه بدائي ولكن من قلب وفهم كيف يعلمنا القراءة والكتابة والأدب والأخلاق. نحترم الكبير، نعطف على الصغير، نهتم بالقضايا ونؤمن بها ونخدمها. أشياء كثير من المدرسة الدينية هذه. نجلس على الأرض ونقرأ القرآن، والمعلم عنده عصا يهددنا بالعصا ومرات يضربنا بالعصا، وكنا نخاف من المعلم من المدرس. بعدين أتذكر في اليوم اجوا جماعة من المدرسة الحكومية أخذونا من المكتبة هذه الدينية إلى المدرسة الحكومية، وهناك دخلنا في الصف الثالث مباشرة. أنه بعد الابتدائية أنا تركت المدرسة لمدة 5 سنوات لأنه ما كانت عندنا فلوس لمواصلة المتوسطة والثانوية. خروجي من المدرسة 5 سنوات كان له تأثير كبير على أن يشعر الإنسان أنه يجب أن يشتغل، واشتغلت في معظم الحقول الممكنة هناك. جابي في بصات بغداد، أجمع فلوس وأبيع بطاقات للمسافرين. أنا اطلعت على الرصافي وهو من الشعراء العباقرة الوطنيين، وشعره كان يدخل في القلب ويؤثر على الشخص الحساس اللي فكلها كان لها تأثير كبير على عواطف الفرد في الاهتمام بالحريات وبالكراهية للاستعمار الغربي. كان عندي صديق في بيركلي من الابتدائية، فكتبت له قلت له أنا حصلت على البعثة، فشوف إذا تقدر تحصل لي على قبول من جامعة كاليفورنيا. بعد بأسبوعين تجيني مقبول في جامعة كاليفورنيا.
There was about 50 students from Iraq and a few hundreds from the rest of the Arabic countries. And we used to gather frequently. We were all students, and we all felt lonely, and we would like to speak Arabic, and we'd like to eat Arabic food and listen to Arabic songs.
في صيف 49 صديق وأنا ذهبنا من بيركلي في كاليفورنيا إلى كندا، إلى شيكاغو، إلى إنديانا، تكساس، لوس أنجلوس، هيتش هايكينج. وكانت تجربة مهمة جدا حتى واحد يشعر جزء من الأرض.
We had the Arabic Students Association, which was on a local level, but then it became on a national level in the United States. And from the very beginning, Dr. Mehdi was a person who was devoting more and more of his time to these public issues.
I met him when I came to the United States. I was a student in 1954. I came from Syria. And after working at the University of Southern California for a year in school and outside school, I was involved with the Organization of Arab Students, of which I was elected the vice president and later on a president. And that's when I heard of Dr. M.T. Mehdi. He was director of the Arab Information Center in San Francisco.
Dr. Mehdi spent a lot of his time in studying politics and economics and history of the United States, and then finally he moved from a limited economic area to political science as such.
Failing to persuade his government to allow him to study political science, he forfeited the scholarship and went to work in the farms of California to pick up tomatoes and carry the boxes on his shoulders until he said, I hated the red color from how much I saw tomatoes.
He used to hold press conferences all the time. He knew that today's news must be responded today. You cannot wait till tomorrow. Otherwise it becomes a stale and it's not newsworthy item anymore. But his boss in New York office of the League of Arab States Information Center in New York didn't like the idea of one of his employees, so to speak, was getting more attention and more publicity. When he resigned, or forced to resign, he needed to write letters to the ambassadors of the of Arab states at the UN, telling them why he resigned, or why he was forced to resign. To make a story short, the ambassador realized that Mehdi was using the offices of the Organization of Arab Students because he can tell from the ink color and the typeset of the typewriter that it is from the Organization of Arab Students. And he threatened the OAS Executive Committee that if this doesn't stop, he would cut off the financial support that the OAS, the Arab students, used to receive from the League of Arab States for rent and telephone and so on and so forth. So I was forced to resign myself.
Of almost all of the rest of us, where we have a regular occupation and a regular salary, and we work for this firm or that company or this university, but he remained independent, and of course that limited his economic income considerably, but at the same time it gave him a great deal of freedom in devoting his time to whatever he wanted to, and what he wanted to, especially in those years, was to be the spokesman for the Arabic cause in general and the Palestinian in particular.
The New York World's Fair was held in Queens, and in it was the Jordanian Pavilion. Inside the Jordanian Pavilion there was a mural that spoke of the tragedies of the refugees. Then we found out that the Zionist organization was putting pressure on the director of the World's Fair, New York World's Fair, to remove that mural. So we told the organizers, Robert Moses, he was the director at that time, that we are the Action Committee on American-Arab Relations and we represent the community, and we would like definitely to protest against the Israeli attempt to take the mural out of the Jordanian Pavilion. Anyway, we succeeded.
Under our circumstances, our limited finances, we have been very successful. Now, many times in the past we used to have demonstrations. There was the Israel Independence Day. 100,000 Jewish bands and marchers on Fifth Avenue, music with pretty girls, walking up First Avenue with politicians, everybody watching, excited, 100,000 of them. We were at a period, it was counter-demonstration composed of Dr. Mehdi and Dr. Muhammad Mehdi. Occasionally we had it with my family, with my daughters. So we were 4, 5, 6 persons. We were in the middle of a circle surrounded by 10, 20 radio, television, cameras, and they were surrounded by a whole police team to protecting us. And we shout, down with Zionism, down in Israel, Palestine is Arab, all that. At the end, in the evening, the news media cover their 100,000 marchers and our 5, 6 disorganized demonstrators. They give them 1.5 minutes, and they give us 30 seconds.
Right.
So 30 seconds for 5, 10 disorganized persons is really great success.
Through the Action Committee on American-Arab Relations, we were able to get the news out. Action Committee, that is the name of the paper. We spent hours and hours putting out viewpoints and perspectives never heard before in the American media.
In the mid-60s, I was going to the Central London Mosque for prayers. and a fellow was standing by the door shyly. "Are you an Arab?" "Yes," I said. "Would you like to buy this book?" He gave me a book for some shillings. It was entitled "A Nation of Lions Chained" by M.T. Mehdi. And before I got home, I started reading the book on the bus. I cannot describe my feelings to find someone who was talking the language that I would have much liked to read or hear.
Again, it's not difficult to understand that some of the more militant Zionists would indeed not only take umbrage, but would commit acts that were actually violent acts. There were times that he himself was physically attacked and actually hurt by people who opposed his point of view.
We were in our office, and suddenly 7 young men with a woman came into the office and started attacking us with batons. But they wanted to leave, and Mehdi had grabbed somebody from the hair, I remember very well, and the boy was screaming, "Let me go," and Mehdi was holding, "You can't go till the police comes," and the poor boy, young man, he was strong. He yanked himself away, and the hair remained in Dr. Mehdi's hand with a piece of the boy's scalp, blooded a little bit, bleeding. That was a sight. I was bleeding from my head to the shoulder, and so I said, "Let's call the emergency." He said, "No, first let's call the media."
Whereas Islam is a way of life, is to reach the people, is to activate goings of the world. And Islam is really, in its spirit, is the positive appreciation of differences.
You know, when we came, we were Arab nationalists, so to speak. We believed in Arab unity and Arabism as a goal and as a unifying factor. But as the year passed, Dr. Mehdi realized that the Islamic circle and Islam are really the basis of work in America as far as information and public relations are concerned.
We should remind the United States that this is not a Judeo-Christian country, but it should be a Judeo-Christian Islamic country. And as a means of reminding everybody that the Muslims are around, and they are many, and they have contributed, and that behind them there is a 1.5 billion people in the world, that they are segment of this huge segment of humanity. Therefore, they should be recognized. And there's especially around the Christmas time, in December, there's something for the Christians and there's something for the Jews. And therefore, the Muslims should also have something which should remind people that there are also Muslims in this country.
Well, so the permit is going to be signed, and oh, wonderful! I am delighted. So we'll receive the permit by the early next week. Crescent صار في محطة المطار العالمي.
نعم. هذا في نيويورك؟
في نيويورك. Kennedy International Airport.
A lot of children around, they have the Christmas tree in their houses. They have all this beautiful light on their windows. There is a lot of children who they have the menorah on their windows, and the crescent star meant that these kids have something to put on their window and be proud of. Let these kids go sing about Ramadan, go sing about Eid al-Adha. As a matter of fact, I'm trying to find some singers to maybe write song about it. Can't be all suffering, can't be all discipline without the fun part of it, because children like fun, and I guess grown-ups too. When you transplant the plant, you need some roots with the plant. So you have to take the roots and some of the soil and put it in a different pot and water it and be careful, right, for it to grow.
في هذا المكان يمر آلافات ويمكن ملايين الناس لمشاهدة نيويورك من أعلى بناية Empire State Building.
These things help to show politicians, to show school educators, to show our neighbor that we are around and we living together, because we are part of the American fabric, as they say. We all together into it. America is not built on one group or another. We all part of it, and we all contribute to the American success.
All Arabs and Pakistanis must die. Now, this is an irritating thing, a hate crime, we consider it, if it is a crime. And this is, of course, particularly terrible because the tension is high with all the threats by the US government to attack Iraq. Makes people jittery, makes people nervous, makes people frightened. Then comes this sign that all Arabs and Pakistanis, means the Muslims, must die. Bye. Well, the police has gone and seen the banner, but they had painted over it. And nothing now appears, but he is sending plainclothes detectives to be sure that it is not going to appear elsewhere, and that this is the end of this kind of terrible anti-Arab, anti-Muslim bias act.
Dr. Mehdi recognized that there were many such groups in the United States, African Americans obviously, who were still trying to shed themselves of the vestiges of slavery and who suffer terrible discrimination.
Kwame, what do you mean by black power? Tell us a little bit more. What is your own background? What made you be the person that you have become?
So most of my work as a young man, in my early years, was done in the hard South, in the deep South, the hard organizing of the African masses there.
And now, some 20 years later...
Same thing.
Same thing. But there has been some change, hasn't there?
Oh, of course. There have been great changes, great changes. But the biggest change, of course, is what is intangible, that is in the consciousness of the people.
Recently, you have published a booklet, Smash Zionism, and this raises a number of serious issues. What's briefly the theme of your presentation here?
The theme of our presentation is that all human beings who are conscious must make an effort in the destruction of Zionism, which is an illegal, racist, unjust, and immoral political system. We make clear distinctions here between Zionism and Judaism, because the Zionists themselves, in trying to confuse people, make it appear as if they're one and the same, but they're in diametrical oppositions to each other. Look at the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. When the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee attacked American imperialism over the war in Vietnam, the Zionists supported it. But once the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in 1967 took a just position against Zionism, the organization was destroyed within 3 months. And the reason is because they seek to control it. Now, what it means is that these organizations probably will have to be destroyed. For example, An African working in the Democratic Party who's conscious must come to destroy the Democratic Party, especially over the question of Zionism. Zionism controls the Democratic Party like a child controls a yo-yo. So here, this is real, their job is to control. Now, they will let you say anything about anything except Israel.
Kwame, would the expression to influence the news media, the organizations, be better than control? Because
that's precisely why this smash Zionism becomes so important. Because in our attack against Zionism, we come to the people. The people in America, the reason why they support Israel is for but one reason. They have no information about it, and they're misguided on it.
The cry that black is beautiful. What brought this brilliant common sense concept to your beautiful head?
No, well, it was necessary. Malcolm X already prepared the way with it constantly, and it had to be done because racism, it will make you think you're ugly, and
deprive the human being of his own
yes, his own natural beauty. You just are not even your self-worth, your natural beauty.
Yeah. Last December, we were able to put a crescent and star, Muslim symbol of it. And it was an historic thing, and I knew that you would be pleased to see this is like the Iwo Jima of the Arabs and Muslims putting this in the front of the White House. And this is the national Christmas.
My brother and my mentor, my teacher, Dr. Muhammad T. Mehdi, may Allah bless his soul, left a great vacuum with his death. A great vacuum with me personally and in the American political scene, because he had become a giant during the 40 years of his activities, of his persistency and his endeavor and his optimism of the future of Arab-American relations and later on American-Islamic relations.
He understood that there was going to be a long struggle, but he really loved the idea of children being able to grow up in a different world. Not just his grandchildren, who he loved very much and talked about, but the whole idea that the reason we fight for this and the reason we have to change the society in this world, in this country, is because we don't want children, anybody's children, growing up in this kind of a society, dog eat dog and bomb Iraq if you want to, show how tough you are and scare everybody around the world.
A scholar, an eloquent speaker, a sincere champion of his people.
It is not sufficient for us to be all fired up about a given issue, but we don't have the stamina to continue that fight, because without that perseverance, we will not achieve much. And it was his determination and stamina that he reached where he did, as being somebody who really started single-handed and with very little money, and at the very end, not many people around him and very little money, but still he was a weight and a force to contend with.
His style is the style of the prophets of all of the great religious traditions. I mean, really, men and women who are fearless, I mean, who deeply believe in the sanctity of the individual person and the sanctity of the family and the sanctity of life together in community. And when that is violated, Dr. Mehdi would always be in the very front of those lifting up the situation and protesting against injustice.
He parted this world, but his message and his cause continue. And I hope that among this audience and others beyond, somebody or some people would carry the torch and march ahead.
We have to continue. And زي ما قلت قبل كده we need thousands and millions of Dr. Mehdi لأن من غير كده مش هنقدر نعمل حاجة. So we really have to follow his legacy. We have to continue his work.
We will not drop the ball at this point in time. I know Brother Ghazi is intending to continue, and Brother Farouk, and I hope we can count on me and my family, but it needs to go beyond the Mehdis now.
But the most distinguishing feature of the open society is participation on the political level. So my first advice is participate on the political level. Join a political party, vote, even for the wrong person, but become engaged in the political activities in the society. And then write to the newspaper editors, learn to call the radio stations, television stations, put your viewpoint clearly, succinctly, and politely. They would listen. What we have to do is a tenacity to continue. Never, ever, ever give up. The future is yours.